We work in a highly regulated industry, regulated for good reason, but we still want to innovate in everything we do, not just in R&D. How we approach patients, how we make treatments available, anything we can do to make a difference in the lives of patients.
Bruce Cozadd, co-founder and chairman and CEO of Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Since starting Jazz in 2003, Bruce has built something truly remarkable.
My focus is on people, patients as people, and employees as people.
You're one of the most empathetic leaders I've had the opportunity to ever meet. What excites you the most about the future of Jazz's role in really pushing the boundaries for scientific innovation?
If you think about jazz as a music or jazz musicians individually, they're always moving forward. They're always trying something new. Patients never say, investors never say, employees never say, oh, we're done now. It's, okay, we've achieved this. What's next?
So first and foremost, I have to say welcome back, everybody. Today, I'm joined by Bruce Cozadd, who's the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Since starting Jazz in 2003, Bruce has built something truly remarkable. It's more than a company. It's an incredible culture. Bruce is a big fan of art. He's a big fan of science of medicine. And really, he's built an incredible culture that is centered around things like empathy and innovation. And, Jazz's approach, I have to say, Bruce, if you don't mind me saying, isn't just about developing new therapeutics. It's about creating a mission-driven organization where people come first. Again, both within the company and in their approach to patients. And Bruce and I had a really great opportunity to talk about that previously. I have to say quickly, Bruce, I know that you're a humble individual, but I have to speak to Jazz's success, which really speaks for itself. According to a 2023 report by Bain & Company, out of 2,500 companies that have reached unicorn status, only 15, i.e. 0.7%, have surpassed $1 billion in annual cash flow. And Jazz counts itself among one of those elite groups. Bruce's leadership has played a very key role in achieving these rare milestones. And today we're going to dive into how Jazz's blend of things like art, science, and really a more deeply human approach to medicine sets itself apart in the industry. So Bruce, I have to ask, again, you've built Jazz on the idea of balancing structure with creativity, science with humanity. How did this vision take shape for you as you started Jazz? And what does it look like today in the company's approach to developing new treatments?
Well, thank you for the overly kind introduction, I'll just say, and it's good to be back with you. My inspiration as one of the founders of Jazz was to take what I learned at Alza about culture and how you treat people, and you emphasize people in your introduction, and apply that culture to solving really important medical problems. The name Jazz played on a couple of metaphors, one of which was this balancing improvisation or innovation with structure, right? If you think about jazz musicians who've never played before together, they can get up on stage and play in front of an audience. Even though they're improvising on top of a structure they all understand. And we work in a highly regulated industry, regulated for good reason, I might add, but we still want to innovate in everything we do, not just in R&D, but how we approach patients, how we make treatments available, anything we can do to make a difference in the lives of patients. So my focus is on people, patients as people, and employees as people.
No, and I really appreciate that. I'm curious, Bruce, how do you see this blend of art and science in really the process?
It starts with applying creativity to solve a problem that's worth solving. We really start with the end in mind at Jazz. We don't start doing creative research and then follow it just wherever it leads. We're trying to solve a certain problem, and we're trying to think about that problem from a patient-centric point of view. Patients don't always think in terms of regulatory endpoints. They think about how a particular disease is impacting their life, be it a chronic disease, be it an acute and life-threatening disease. They're really thinking about how it impacts their life. And so we try to figure out what solutions can we apply that will make a difference to those patients, sort of working backwards to what tools to use to get there. There was a tagline we used early in Jazz's history called innovation that performs. Obviously, performance, a little play on music, but innovation that matters, right? Innovation that performs for the patient, does something the patient really cares about. So if you're intensely focused on what problem you're trying to solve, I think you can work backwards to what's the best way to get where we want to go.
Let's talk more about the idea of improvisation within structure. It really is a unique philosophy, I have to say, for a pharmaceutical company. In medicine and in jazz, it seems there is a constant balance between scientific rigor and I'll refer to it more as creative problem solving. Could you share how this approach has influenced some of jazz's therapeutic innovations, maybe where you found creative ways to approach complex problems and, I don't know, drug development, commercialization, manufacturing? I don't know if there's
Yeah.
anything you can hit on.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say innovation can happen anywhere in a company. I sometimes say don't innovate in accounting, but other than that, uh, innovation isn't just confined to one part of the organization. And I've often found we've had creative clinical regulatory strategies that have really made a difference for patients. One of my favorite examples of that is when we developed Rylaze, which we took from preclinical all the way through to the market in really record time. We did some innovative things along the way. We were trying to solve a particular problem, making an enzyme available for patients that had been in short supply before. And we collaborated with FDA and we collaborated with the Children's Oncology Group to think about how we could do that in the quickest way possible. For example, we had a pre-IND meeting without a molecule yet. You don't usually go to regulators and say, let's talk about our development program, even though I don't have a molecule yet. But we had an idea of what we wanted to try to accomplish. We ultimately took two parallel programs forward, uh, assuming we choose the best one when we hit a certain point in development, and had a very open, collaborative relationship with FDA. We used to have weekly CMC calls to really talk about what we were doing. Both FDA said to me and I said to FDA, if we see each other doing anything that could be done faster, let's call each other on it. Like let's try to move this forward. Ultimately, that product was approved and brought to market before we finished the pivotal clinical trial, although we had the data we needed. That was only happening because all of us, regulators, treaters in the case of Children's Oncology Group, and Jazz as the manufacturer and innovator were working together to solve a particular problem for kids who had a stronger chance of a cure of ALL if this therapy was available to them. And we all wanted to do that as quickly as possible. So innovation in this case happened in all aspects of our operations. We called this Project Lightspeed, and it was really, how can we accomplish this as quickly as possible?
I love that. First and foremost, because it's not often we hear about that level of creativity being valued in a field like ours. Another area where it feels like jazz has brought some art into the process is really through your patient-centered model. Again, something you've built to help providers understand the whole person, not just the disease. Where did this idea come from, and really how does this approach differ from what we typically see in pharma?
Well, first of all, I don't want to presume that we don't see it in pharma. I don't know what's going on inside every organization. I know what's going inside our organization. And, when we have those moments that I think do happen in many companies where we are exposed to a patient's story, a patient standing on stage, a patient filmed in a video, however it's conveyed, it's often a very impactful presentation. But what I've liked to do is make sure we don't lose sight of that person and we check in with them again a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. What's going on in their life? How did that moment of therapy, if it was acute therapy, how did that course of therapy, if it was a chronic therapy, really impact them in their words? Right. And again, this isn't about clinical endpoints. It's about I was able to go back to grad school. I was able to pursue a dream I had. Here's how it impacted my family around me. Here's the good I was able to do with my career, based on the successful treatment I got. So really connecting with patients as people, and then thinking about how that therapeutic journey has impacted them. Sometimes it's can we make a therapy available closer to home rather than having to travel to an academic medical center? Is it, I only need to go in for treatment once every 3 weeks rather than, continuous infusion over a period of 4 days every week? Or maybe we recognize that what is best for a pediatric patient, where the parents often step in and ensure compliance, versus an adult treatment where that adult may not be as strict as their own parents would be with a child. What would work in their lifestyle in terms of compliance and convenience? And also that chronic look at patients makes you think about therapies in other ways too. We brought forward a lower sodium version of a chronic medication, in part because we were watching patients on medication for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and more, and recognizing the cardiovascular burden that high sodium load conveyed in this particular disease state. And so caused us to go back and engineer a different product to meet that need. So again, not just thinking about one moment of intervention, but really how can you impact someone's life through what we do as a company, which happens to be, creating medicines and neuroscience and oncology.
I mean, listen, right? It's really interesting how you outlined it through those different examples. How do you instill, like, when I think about things like connecting leadership? I know, Bruce, you and I have had a chance to really talk about your interest and passion. That's why I'm hitting hard on the arts and the
Yeah.
combination of art and science and theater and performance. And it's really, I really do believe that so many of these different aspects really can help fortify and make not only the creation of drugs, but also the delivery of drugs far simpler and far easier when you actually understand and you can empathize in the way that you do. You're one of the most empathetic leaders I've had the opportunity to ever meet. And so I know empathy is core to who you are as an individual, who you are as a human, how you think about your employees, how you think about everybody in your life. Um, how do you cultivate that compassion in the next generation of leaders at Jazz? I.e., I have to assume that not every single person is exactly like you, Bruce. So how do you think about really bringing out those best and incredible qualities out of them that you yourself naturally convey day to day?
Yeah, well, if you grew up in the arts, if you've performed, if I sang in singing groups, be they choruses or a cappella groups, if you've been on stage as part of a cast putting on a production, you're aware of the impact of emotion in the arts. And in my life, I'm very moved by patient stories. I'm also very moved by live musical performances, live theatrical performances. I go to as many as I can. And so storytelling can be an effective way of conveying information in a way that people feel. They're more likely to remember. It's more likely to affect change if you can connect in that way. And then you asked specifically how you pass it along to employees or other leaders. And I believe that part of your culture and inculcating and reinforcing a strong culture is what you choose to reward inside an organization. So we think about what behaviors we want and what behaviors we reward. We talk a lot about collaboration, and how we define collaboration is not just inside the company. It's how do you collaborate with regulators? How do you collaborate with advocacy organizations? How do you collaborate with companies you work with in one way or another? It's collaboration broadly writ. Similarly, how do you show passion for patients and passion for the company, passion for the work we do? Once you establish those values, we reward them. And the highest honor you can achieve at Jazz is to be named a Jazz Master, which is employees from anywhere in the organization except management, uh, who we believe really are great ambassadors for our culture. They're really living our values as we define them. It's nominated by peers, it's celebrated throughout the company, and that nomination process and celebration process isn't just about the few individuals we honor. It's reinforcing what we care about. It's reinforcing that culture. And I believe if you think about hard about what you reward, you'll see more of it. I'll give you one example. It's always tempting to reward the project team that comes in and works over a holiday or works late into the night to make things happen at the last minute. And sometimes that is absolutely worthy of recognition. What about the other team next door that planned everything perfectly, executed well, and didn't need to come in that last weekend? What are you saying to them if you reward the first team? And so thinking about what are we signaling to the organization when we reward certain behaviors, and being very intentional about that.
Yeah, the idea of nurturing cultural leaders within the organization feels especially valuable. I never really thought about it like that. Another key component I know that's really important, though, is resilience. Resilience is another necessity, whether it's for the individuals planning very well ahead for those launches, and or maybe the team that is putting in work over the holidays to get it done. Out of curiosity, like, how do you guide your teams to stay adaptive and resilient in the face of a lot of maybe challenges that you otherwise, even with perfect planning, would otherwise not have been able to predict?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a perfect answer to that, but I would say, our patients face incredible challenges. So sometimes it's worth putting your own challenges at work in context, relative to the battles our patients are facing every day. And it's also important, again, as I talked about earlier, to keep the end in mind. The end we're trying to achieve is really making a difference for patients and their families. The end is not, one deadline on a calendar or one step along the way. It's getting all the way to the finish line. And so things aren't always linear, particularly when you're innovating. Um, so when we hit a stumbling block, when something doesn't go the way we wanted it to stop and ask, now what? How might we still accomplish our goal? Maybe in a different way. Um, but to remember that end goal is the important thing. To have a growth mindset. We can always learn, we can always get better. We learn from our mistakes, whether it applies to this program or the next program. So how do we have that growth mindset rather than saying, I can't do that, or I don't know how to do that. I don't yet know how to do that. I don't yet know how to solve that problem, but how can we approach it a different way? And so I think there are a number of things you can point to that help people get through the inevitable disappointments of biological R&D, which is complex for a reason because biology is complex and worth it to get there.
Absolutely. It's I liked your point too around how, again, the science and the innovation isn't always linear, and that's part of the magic. That's part of what makes our industry so fun. I mean, again, it's inspiring the to see how really Jazz's philosophy sets itself apart. Looking ahead for the company, what excites you the most about the future of Jazz's role in really pushing the boundaries for scientific innovation?
Well, again, I don't want to claim, jazz has a role in changing the whole world, but when we choose a particular, set of patients or a particular disease to focus on, I think we can make a real difference. And, part of that is trying new approaches to solve problems. There are new modalities of treatment that have made incredible progress in recent years, new ways to use data to get insights that continue to advance quickly. So again, we try to work from the problem backwards to say what modality might be the best approach to solve this particular problem, rather than we're always going to use the same tool no matter what problem we're looking at. Sometimes it's a combinatorial approach. You're combining a couple different things to get a new answer. But this is where the jazz analogy comes back to me. If you think about jazz as a music or jazz musicians individually, they're always moving forward. They're always trying something new. It's never about, I'm done now. I've solved the problem. I'm going to do it the same way forever. It's always how do we try something new? How do we continue to push forward? So that's inspiring to me, never to think you're done. And I'm 21 and a half years into the journey with jazz. And, patients never say, investors never say, employees never say, oh, we're done now. It's okay, we've achieved this. What's next? Where can we go from here? How can we improve upon where we already are? So it's always about that growth mindset and moving forward.
Bruce, I'm going to quickly shift off topic for a second. When we chatted in August, and then I had the opportunity to see you in October, we were talking a bit about a performance that you had the ability to go and attend. I really wanted to talk more about what that meant to you, being able to see that live, and really how it connects back to a lot of the messaging we're talking about here in the blend of art and science.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. I went to see a show on Broadway in previews in early October. Actually, it formally opened in late October, called Left on 10th by Delia Ephron, and it's a great show. First of all, if you get a chance to see it on Broadway, go see it. She's a gifted playwright and author. But this work came out of a book Delia wrote, also called Left on 10th, which was a New York Times bestseller. And she happens to mention in the book a treatment she underwent that involved a Jazz Pharmaceuticals product. And because of that, and I knew about this even before she wrote the book, I had a chance to meet Delia and hear about that. And so it was a little special for me to see a show on Broadway. I've always loved theater that happened to mention something that came out of drug development. And that's not the main point of the show. I don't mean to say it is, but it gave it extra meaning for me to see that particular show on Broadway. And another way of thinking about the impact we have on somebody, here's somebody where we impacted their life, as she details in her book. And then because we impacted her life, she had the opportunity to tell her story through a book and then through a show on Broadway to a broader audience. So it just felt like this incredible synchronicity that all these things came together for me, and getting to see this show with my daughter in early October.
Oh, that's incredible. Bruce, no, thanks for this. Before I let you go, I have to ask this final question. There's a lot of future leaders that are listening, and there's many who want to build with a similar philosophy and combination of really combining things like creativity, empathy, and scientific rigor. What's one piece of advice you'd offer to these individuals? Really, something you wish more leaders would consider when they're building cultures of their own.
Hard to limit it to just one piece of advice, Chase.
We can do multiple. We can do multiple. We can do multiple.
But so I'll do a couple. One is learn from leaders you admire. In my case, the person who's had the biggest impact on my career was Alejandro Zaffaroni, Alex Zaffaroni, who founded Alza, where I worked for 10 years, and I was profoundly impacted by the way he ran an organization. And so I learned from him and, try to model myself in many ways after the lessons I learned from him. And I think he created a sort of a diaspora of leaders that worked for him, each of whom brought a little bit of Alex to their next venture. I like to think I've done a little bit of that. There are, I think, 18 former Jazz CEOs out there now who, one point were part of our company. Hopefully, they're instilling some of that same, Alex magic out in the world. So, learn from leaders. And then the other thing that's at least true for me that I recommend to others is be your authentic self. And I try to be the same person whether I'm with new employees, a management team, a board of directors, investors, advocacy groups, competitors, collaborators. I'm me, and I would say to leaders, try to figure out as early as you can what you stand for, what's important to you, and then stick by that.
That's funny. That last point you hit on, the authenticity piece, really rings home. I was actually chatting with another executive who described it, a little bit. I came away and I'm still processing the conversation we had. I don't want to say any names, but it was a really interesting conversation. And it was saying like, the more successful you become, the truer human of who you are comes out. And I thought that was interesting because I started thinking about it. And, I'll speak for myself, Bruce, because I know that you and I, you've always been your authentic self. But every human being, we all have our vulnerabilities. We all have our insecurities. That's part of being human. That's part
For
of being
sure.
part of being imperfect, right? And I've just noticed that, at least in my career, as I've been more and more successful, I've found that a lot of those insecurities start to wither more and more away. And the truer human or the truer individual I am comes out more and more in the workplace.
I'm gonna say yes, and
Yep.
I think the same thing can be true for going through significant challenges, professionally and personally, both. And it will be easy to say success has let me be more myself. But I learned a lot about myself during some of the company's darkest days too. What does drive you to be resilient, a word you used earlier in the conversation, when your back's up against a wall, and what really motivates you in those moments to keep fighting and find a way through. And so I think it's both. I think it's successes, but it's also challenges and coming through challenges that make you more comfortable with who am I really and what's really important to me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I always like to say too, it's those moments when your back is against the wall, or I always like to, the analogy I use is when I'm lying on my back in the room, feeling sorry for myself. In those moments where you realize the only thing you can do is get up and keep trying. This has really been an incredible conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time. And really always, it's a really great opportunity for me to get my mentorship through you. And again, I really do appreciate you taking time out of your day and joining us on this. It really is a special conversation.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it, Chase. Thanks.